What's going on, Spitfires? Welcome back to the Spitfire podcast. I'm your host, LeMunyan, the Spitfire Coach, and can't wait to share this episode with you all. It has been a hot minute since I have been able to record. Life has thrown some loops, and that is an understatement, but I wanted to catch y'all up, give you some lessons learned, some things that we're working on in the future, and maybe it'll inspire you, light a fire under you, or maybe it'll just bring out some curiosity to whatever it is that you're focusing on in your life. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And just as a reminder, if you're not already subscribed, head over to wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or you can go to spitfirecoach.com/episode and catch up on our over 200 episodes. So I'm currently recording this in early August, and I thought it probably would be a good idea to catch y'all up on how my summer vacation, or lack thereof, has been going. If you follow me on any of the social media channels, on Threads is probably the most detailed you're ever going to see about my life, or Facebook, not really on Instagram. I have been documenting what I can about what's been happening this summer. So if you are like, what the hell are you talking about? Girl, I don't even know you. Let me just bring you up to speed, because that'll probably provide enough context for you to understand where we're going here. So in early June, on June 3rd, my husband had a pre-scheduled surgery. So for a couple years, he had a non-cancerous tumor growing in his ear called an acoustic schwannoma. It's spelled SCHWANOMMA, I believe. If you get it somewhere around that spelling, it should pop up. Essentially, it is a non-cancerous tumor that grows at usually a relatively slow pace, but it's problematic because it is essentially growing into the brain, which was what was happening to my husband. So his hearing was impacted, and he was getting MRIs every 6 months, and they basically said, like, it's got to come out now. It's growing pretty aggressively at this point. So he finished his master's program at NDU and literally didn't walk at graduation because that was happening on the 9th of June, and he had surgery scheduled for the 3rd. So everything was set in motion. He had the surgery. It took about 8 hours. They called me every 2 hours, let me know how everything was going. Basically, like, he told me before surgery, like, don't even bother coming the day of surgery because I'm going to be so out of it, and wait until I tell you when I'm okay to see you, because they have a lot of drugs in him and everything else, and he was pretty banged up. As part of this surgery, we knew that his balance nerve was going to be cut, so his balance was going to be impacted, and there was the potential for facial paralysis on his right side, because we later found out after they had done the surgery that the tumor had bisected his facial nerve. So they do testing as they're going through the surgery and at the end to make sure that the nerve has not been compromised. And so everything looked normal, but the tumor had grown pretty aggressively and had basically grown through the nerve. So he had some facial paralysis. I saw him on the Thursday. He had surgery on Tuesday, and he looked pretty banged up. I was like, wow, you think you're coming home in a couple days? That's wild. So I saw him in ICU. He started having some headaches, and they're like, no, this is totally related to the surgery. We'll just up your Tylenol, up your ibuprofen, whatever they were putting him on. And I was actually there, and they were like kind of these rolling headaches that would start from the back of his head and move forward. And my husband usually does not complain about pain, and to see him in that much pain was pretty jarring. But everyone was pretty confident that this was all part of it. So they moved him down to the recovery floor, and on Saturday, he was ready to be discharged. So I had the baby. I drove the baby out to his parents' house so they could watch her. And then I drove another hour back to Walter Reed, picked him up on Saturday afternoon, got all of his medication, and got him back to the house to rest. And so everything was going as planned to his recovery. He slept the night in another room. I was in another room with the baby just so I could make sure I could hear him if he needed anything, make sure he had his medication. And then on Sunday, the baby did not sleep well. It was really warm in the house, and we couldn't get the lighting right, and she just was cranky galore. And I just said, you know what, I think I need to take her home just so she can sleep. Are you okay staying here? Or do you want to come back to the house? And he said, I'll just stay here. And I was about to leave to go back to our house about an hour away in Alexandria. And then I saw reports for some pretty extreme weather. I think there was a tornado watch, definitely some thunderstorms. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to stay the night here. And so this is Sunday. This is about 3:00. About an hour or two later, he starts complaining that his hand feels weird, that it starts to tingle, that he's not really able to grip things and things are starting to feel weird. And I said, well, maybe you pushed it too much. Let's take your meds. Let's see if you need to rest. And he went to take his medication, which should have knocked him out and let him sleep. And he couldn't sleep. And so another 90 minutes, 2 hours passes, and he comes out and he says, we need to go to the hospital right now. I can't feel my arm. And so we go to get into my car, and I said, are we going to the local hospital or are we going to Walter Reed? And he said, you need to call 911. And so I'm back into the house. I'm calling 911, giving them all the information because he thinks he's going to have a stroke or has had a stroke. So they come in, they do their preliminary tests. They bring him to the closest hospital, which is about 15 minutes from his parents' house. And they do a brain scan. And we're there for maybe an hour or two, if that. And the doctor is looking concerned. And I'm thinking, okay, something's just weird with his medication. We can go home. And I was so wrong. And he shared that they saw bleeding in his brain and they saw the formation of additional blood clots in his brain. And so they then scheduled for transport to Walter Reed, which was about 45 minutes away. So he gets in the ambulance, but nobody's really like super concerned. It's kind of just like a matter of fact where they don't have the equipment to treat him. And because he had had surgery, he needed to go back to his place of care. So we head back. I'd follow in my car and get to the hospital. And he's already been admitted into the ICU. And there are about 10 doctors around him in his room. And I go in. And the way that they were talking was just kind of this matter of fact, we're going to put you on blood thinners. This is the treatment. It's going to take some time. And the communication to me was go home and get rest because there's really nothing that you can do here. And, it's just he's going to have to go through this. So I turn around, get back in my car after being there for less than an hour, and it's probably close to midnight when I start heading back another hour in the direction of his parents' house. And as I'm about 5 minutes away from his parents' house, I'm on these windy roads in Waterford, Virginia. I see on my caller ID Walter Reed, and I immediately know that it's not good news. Because if I've already talked to the doctors and they're saying everything's good, we're going to, just follow this course of action. I don't know why I need another phone call. And it's his neurosurgeon. And the neurosurgeon says, are you sitting down? Are you at home? And I said, no, but I'm close. But I don't want to wake people up. So, we can just talk here. And he's like, okay, are you sure? And so he basically starts to share with me. And if you've listened to last week's episode or the last episode I posted, a lot of that is in here. But essentially, he tells me that the course of action is either going to kill him or it's going to work. And there's basically no way to know unless they do it. And there's no other treatment because of the placement of the clots. It's not like you can put a catheter in there. And there's just no other option there. So basically, I had to then go in and tell his parents, like, your son may die. This is really serious. And I don't know what the hell we're going to do. Except wait, because it's now, 1:00 in the morning and no one should be driving. I've now been on the road for 3-4 hours, that day. And so, we just held each other, cried, tried to figure out what the plan of attack was. And so, we eventually all passed out because nobody could really sleep. I don't know how anyone sleeps with news like that. And I had to go sleep in the baby's room because the battery had died and we didn't have the cord to charge it. So I had to go sleep in there and make sure she was good. And I finally passed out around, 3:30, 4:00. And then at 4:30, I woke up with just this burning sensation and like this super loud voice, like, go to him now. And that will forever be like embedded in my head. And right around that time is when he started to seize. So he had an 8-minute seizure. They had started, they call it heparin. It's a blood thinning IV drip. So in the course of that treatment, he started seizing. And so they had to pull him off of the blood thinner and try to stabilize him. And at 5 o'clock, they called me and told me what happened. And I just jumped out and got his mom up and left. And they took care of the baby. And I sped off another hour on the road to Walter Reed, because it was now Monday. I think it was Sunday morning. It was the 9th. I don't even remember days anymore. It's happened so long ago. So I basically went back to Walter Reed and called in every single family member, because what he did tell me was, if things don't go well, call family, he has 2 older boys, call their mom, have them come in, like, you make the call. And so if I was going to make the call, that was the call I needed to make. And so I called my parents to come in and help out with the baby. I called his sister. I called his ex-wife, and just let them know what was happening and that this was serious and everybody needed to come in, because we didn't know what was going to happen. So by the time I got there, on my way, I actually called a friend who's a coach, and she just basically let me talk and vent it out, and she prayed the crap out of it, and just made sure that I was good on that trip, because I was terrified. I had 33 minutes of sleep that night, and I was just firing on endorphins and stress and cortisol and who the hell knows. Not enough calories, that's for sure. So I get to the hospital, and he's stabilized, but he's completely out of it. And I'm thinking, okay, like, he's stabilized, we're okay. And basically the doctor's like, we're not going to know, because he's not back on the drip, if this is going to work or not. We've got about like 24 hours of just waiting to see what's going to happen. And so we waited and waited and waited. And finally in the afternoon, we got a clear scan, meaning that there were no new blood clots. Once they put him back, they call it a therapeutic level. So it's making sure that it's not too extreme that would create more hemorrhaging, and not enough that it wouldn't be effective. So they were able to find that level. And for the next couple of days, he was on that. I stayed the night with him in the hospital room. He has no memory of this at all, which is probably for the best. And there were many times where he asked me if he was going to die. And I said, you're abso-fucking-lutely not dying. And I just gave him forward points in our life of things that we wanted to do together with our baby, with he and I, so that he had something to point to, even if he wasn't going to remember it. I had to keep him in a forward progression. I had to keep myself in a forward progression. I had to keep things light. And so when I had to explain where he was, or, answer something for the 14th time, I would just turn it into a big joke, or I would just be ridiculous about it, because I couldn't let fear and the trauma take over, because I had to be that neutral stance for him. I had to give him something to point to that was not scary, because he knew what was going on. He called out for help before the seizure and has very vivid memories still to that. Doesn't remember everything that happened 36 hours after that, but it's all there. And so I then became this, like, it's almost like a cruise director, caregiver, where I felt like I had to sit in on every doctor's meeting, sit in with every person and tell them every point by point, play by play, assess it, give everybody updates on text message and phone calls. And so I got really tired really fast. And, people try to mean well in saying, make sure you take care of yourself. But what the hell does it even mean? Like, I would love to take care of myself, but I'm going back and forth between my house on an hour-long trip each way from the metro, or I'm sitting in a car in traffic trying to get to the hospital every day for the next week. And so it's just not possible. And I say this because I know people are well-intentioned, but, like, don't ask people when they're in the middle of crisis how they're doing. They're not doing well, and they really don't want to talk about it. So here's the best thing you can say to people. I'm thinking of you. I hope you're doing okay. I would love to send you something. Please let me know when a good time is to do that. Leave it super simple, specific, like if it's a meal, if it's a gift card, like, just have it be an easy yes for people, because the last thing that someone in crisis, in a health crisis with a loved one, needs to do is, like, think about someone else. It's just not possible. I could barely take care of my daughter. I got home to make sure that I could put her down for bedtime, and sometimes I couldn't even do that. I would try to get her up and take her to daycare just to create some normalcy. But even that wasn't possible. So the things that you used to be able to do just fall to the wayside because all of this takes over. So he, going back to my husband, I consider it, and I think a lot of the doctors have described it as almost a miraculous recovery. Within 48 hours, he got his full hand moving. He was able to touch all of his fingers. He literally went from not being able to raise his left arm to having full use of it. Now he still has some nerve issues to this point, but the fact that the stroke and the seizure, he had multiple strokes leading up into it. But the fact that even where it was on his motor skills and his brain, he was still able to recover in the speed and the intensity that he was is really just incredible. So also throughout this, and I didn't mention, we didn't have health insurance because apparently in the military, they give you orders. One person's supposed to click a box, upload here, but you don't know if they've done their job or not until something bad happens, like us, where we get calls from people within the health insurance system saying we can't refer you out to PT specialists because you don't have active insurance. My husband is active duty military, so we get insurance by way of that. And so I was just like, this is insane. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. And so I'm trying to figure all this out while he's in the recovery room from just having a stroke. Not advisable, which also meant that later on, once everything started to settle, I then got a whole avalanche of bills that I then had to go and call and remedy. Now, we didn't have to pay for it, but like still to this day, I'm getting alerts that a bill is due. And I'm like, we don't owe money on that, and I don't even know who to get into contact with. So headaches upon headaches, but all resolvable. And that was kind of the mentality that I had with all of this, is like, what is it in this immediate sight view that I need to focus on? What needs to be addressed? What needs my energy that's critical and essential? And what is just extra crap that I don't need to deal with? And a lot of that was relationships. Like I had already taken off of work for the month of June, which I'm very thankful I did. I wasn't responding to emails unless like I felt like it was a low lift. If anyone sent me a text message over 1 or 2 lines, I wasn't going to respond to it. In fact, if messages felt like, you remember I said the "how are you," I wasn't going to respond to it because I don't have the bandwidth. I still don't have the bandwidth for it right now, honestly. I just had an acupuncturist appointment. She's like, "How are you?" And I was like, that's such a big ass question. Like, I don't even know how to slice that right now. I'm alive. I'm well, okay, but I'm a mess. I know I'm still a mess. We're all real whacked out is the best way to put it. We're just freaking whacked out. So all that to say, we got him out of the hospital after about a week of being there, which is incredible, based on what happened to him and just like the fluke of it all. So I took him home on I think it was Father's Day. Yeah, I took him home on Father's Day. It was a Sunday. And then he started complaining about headaches again. And I was like, what is happening here? Like, is this part of the recovery from his first surgery? Like, what's going on here? And then on that Thursday night, he just started shaking uncontrollably. And I was terrified. And I called our friend who lives in the neighborhood and I said, I need you to take him to the hospital, to Walter Reed, because I've got the baby here. I can't get him there and grab her. It's just not going to work. So he's also military and was able to take him, because I knew if we went to a nearby hospital, it was just going to be more time, more delay. And they were ultimately going to have to send him to Walter Reed. So this was the fastest way. It was about a 30-minute drive. So he took him, and it turns out that he had COVID. So he had not only crazy headaches, but 103 fever that wouldn't break. And so they ended up admitting him, and he was in there in one of those negative pressure rooms for, I think, like 4 days. And they put him on an IV antiviral for COVID. And really that should have knocked out his symptoms, but it didn't. I've never seen him in so much pain. He was in pain from his lower back of being in the hospital, not being able to move. But something else was just not right. And he was noticing fluid was coming out of his nose, not like I have a cold type of thing. None of the COVID symptoms were there. So we went back to the ER probably like a week or so after he got discharged, and they just chalked it up to, no, sometimes the symptoms can last 3 to 4 weeks. But we have a friend that's in infectious disease actually at Walter Reed that he went to high school with. And he said the symptoms should have been gone within 3 to 4 days, especially on that antiviral. This should not be the case. I said, well, this is what they're saying. I'm not sure what else we can do. So he just kind of suffered through and took his Tylenol as prescribed, and was really just kind of gritting his teeth to get through it, which was really hard to watch and really hard to just like contend with, because we're just operating like he's sick. So he's sleeping in the basement. I'm sleeping upstairs. He can't interact with the baby. We're masking up everywhere, wiping down all the surfaces, trying to get out for walks, but it's 100 degrees here. So it just really was a really hard situation. And then we had a pre-planned neurology or neurosurgery follow-up. So for the original surgery, which was a month from the surgery date. And we go in there and, basically shows him like, hey, I've got this liquid coming out. And the doctor's like, yep, that is a cerebral spinal fluid leak. So they go and they test it, because one of the issues with that is that you can get bacterial meningitis, which can kill you. And so he said, well, I can send you home and you can stay upright and hope that it seals on its own from his original surgery. Because basically it was his nose connecting with the sinus in his ear cavity. So either you can go home and do this, or we can admit you and we're going to have to do surgery. And we both looked at each other and we're like, we're staying here. We're not going home. And so ironically, I had a keynote speech on resilience that day, which is what is the previous episode to this. But it was not a good day. It was a good day that we were getting it taken care of, but everything started to then make sense. Where the headaches were coming from, where the fevers were coming from, where the fluid was coming from. It's like, it's clearly not COVID, but nobody was really taking us seriously. Nobody was listening to the fact that something's not right here. And so I will just highlight, advocate the crap out of yourself and for your loved one, because even us, like, getting free healthcare and like having access to specialists and all these things, like, they weren't hearing us. They were all just kind of brushing it off of like, it's not a big deal. Like, oh, this is totally normal, but it wasn't normal. There was really nothing normal about my husband's case. Like, aside from the surgery, everything that happened afterwards was just like fluke upon fluke upon fluke. And so if you're not paying attention to things, like, bad shit can happen. So we get the surgery done. He basically, he had all of his inner ear removed on the right side, since he couldn't hear out of it anyway. And they packed it with fat from his belly and some bone wax. I know way too much shit about health stuff now. It's like all of that ER, watching those shows, like, didn't prepare me for this. But basically, like, they sealed him up and he doesn't have an ear hole anymore. So he then couldn't sleep below a 30-degree angle, couldn't pick up our baby or anything over 10 pounds for 4 weeks, and just very, very minimal surgery. So that brings us to present day today. So I'm recording this on Wednesday, August 6th. So tomorrow will be 4 weeks. So he will be able to pick up our daughter, and he is actually out on a 5K walk because the weather is beautiful. We had a follow-up appointment yesterday with neurology, and we actually ran into his ear, nose, and throat doctor in the elevator, and he gave him like a 30-second exam. It was great. So he's getting lots of positive affirmations about what's happening in his body, that things are going to plan, things look good, that there is hope for what's next, that he does have a future. He is going back to work on August 18th, which is wild. So there's kind of a new light shining on the future, and it's not this big gray, murky question mark like it's been. And I think for both of us, we've kind of been holding our breath and not knowing what's going to come next, and not knowing what could happen. But the reality is, like, we've never really known. We've never had control over any of this stuff. And I think that's kind of the false sense of control is the most damaging in all of these situations, and in the state of the world right now, in what's happening in this country. Us expecting different is really where the disappointment happens. It's really where we get really dysregulated in our nervous system. And that's not to say that we just kind of like roll over and deal with it and just accept it. It's more of like looking at it from the perspective of what's in my control and what's not. Like, what can I let go of and where do I actually have influence? So especially when you have a health crisis with a loved one, you don't have any other option but to hyper focus on that person and to make sure that they're okay. There's no other competition. And in fact, if it does, it becomes a huge source of stress. And there's only one option, which is to let go of the lower level priorities if you can. I don't know how I would have worked a 9-to-5 job during this. I would have had to take off of work. I don't know how I would have cared for my baby by myself while all this. And I'm sure like you would have just figured it out, but I'm really happy that I didn't have to do it by myself. But I also know that a lot of people do. And all through this, I kept thinking about how are other people dealing with this? How are other people impacted by this? And I think it's just more of you go into survival mode. And I guess the question is, when does that stop? Like, when do you know when you can start to phase out of survival mode? Does that ever go away? And these are kind of questions I'm asking myself. But I feel myself coming out of it. I feel myself being able to take deeper breaths. I have new bursts of creativity. I just like started journaling about like deeper thoughts and processing things on a deeper level. And I haven't been able to do that in months. I have been going back to the gym. I went and, did acupuncture and have been tightening up my diet because I totally let that slide. And when you don't eat well, you feel like garbage because you're consuming garbage. So I'm slowly incorporating things back in that matter. And this is all part of like that resiliency ride of like this reflection, which is why I wanted to record this podcast, because I haven't really sat down and just kind of put it all together. And I think it just acknowledges like it's been a lot. It continues to be a lot. It doesn't stop being a lot. It just changes like what kind of lifts and what's still there. And my husband and I have had to have really hard conversations about fear, about future, about what it looks like without one of us here and what that means for us, for our daughter, for like purpose. Those are not fun conversations. But I think we need to have them because I can't imagine like something really awful happening and then not knowing what to do. And in fact, that's what was happening when I was driving to the hospital after he was seizing. I was like, okay, if something awful happens, who do I call? And those are crazy thoughts to have. Like it is not fun. And I also acknowledge that people have to do this all the time. Like I'm on Threads. It is my save space. I love this. I love that platform so much. But I see people going through like insane hardships and they have to make those decisions and they have to have those calls. And my heart breaks for them because you don't ever get to come back from that. You don't ever get to not have that conversation. That is always a part of your fabric. And it's active trauma. Like all it takes is one person like asking, like I'm still emotional about what happened. It's less of an impact now. Like I'm not bawling on stage like I was before, but it's still very much there. Like, I don't ever want to have that conversation with his parents again. So I watch him like a hawk. I'm like the enforcer of all rules. Like we are not doing this. Thank you very much. So even though we're through like the dicey stuff, we are still working through it. Like he's still doing physical therapy. We still have follow-up appointments. There's still blood work to do. And life is still happening. So it's very much like, okay, this is what it is today. This is what it could be tomorrow. But really, we don't know much more than that. Like the army could pick us up and move us anytime they want. They could medically retire him. They could do a number of things. And so the best thing we can do is just focus on the day-to-day and plan for what it is that we want to create and what's most important. And so we're talking about traveling more. We're talking about, what would happen if we're not in the army anymore? Where would we want to be? What would it look like if he got medically retired? And what pieces can we let go of? And what do we want to hold on to? And so, I think that choice and options is freedom. Like those things are what allow us to be creative. It's what allows us to kind of breathe, and just kind of like take a pause. And that is the most important part. Like wherever you can take a second or two or a minute or two, or shoot, if you got an hour, like just really embracing the pause to exhale, to like focus on what you need. Like if it's a medical appointment, if it's a hot cup of tea, if it's a walk, if it's a snuggle, if it's a nap, like there's such simple things that make a world of difference. And I didn't realize how much I took them for granted until like I really didn't have anything to do in the day and I didn't know what to do with myself. And I was like, oh, we have forgotten how to take care of ourselves because we are now wound up in what everybody else needs. So it's been this really intense gut check and like mirroring exercise of like, now that you're paying attention, what needs attention? So that's what I've been up to this summer. I've also been working when I can. I've had a couple clients that have been amazing and very understanding where I've had to cancel on them like last second and reschedule them. And I brought on some new clients, and I got a new course approved through ICF called Future Self Design. So I'm actually teaching coaches how to facilitate future transformations for their clients, beyond just like focusing on the problem. And I think that's the story in all of this, is like if I was hyper focused on solving the problem that was what my husband's health was, I would have been wrapped up in that drama and that story. And instead, I kept pointing him to a future point, us together, him in the future, him envisioning himself in all of these storylines that we had talked about. And I fully believe that that helped to point him into really fighting for his life and surviving through this, because the cards were stacked against him for sure. So I'm going to keep doing that work. It's very much needed. We all have a future. It may not be the future that we thought it was going to be, but I think that we can design some pretty kick-ass ones, and we can start to really own what we create in the future and who we show up as. I think that's the most beautiful thing that's come from all of this, is like we can still create magic even when there's so much muck around us. Like we can still convert that into making positive impact and showing up in the way that we want, and making things better for ourselves and for others. So I hope this was helpful. I usually don't do very long form. 30 minutes is like, I can't believe I just talked for that long. But again, I just wanted to share, and if this resonates with anybody, I'd love to hear from you. I know, a lot of people have stuff going on with themselves health-wise or with loved ones, and maybe had a loved one not make it from a traumatic brain injury or anything else. And I'm amazed. I've connected with so many people who I didn't expect, who've been really carrying this grief around with them. And just by sharing what's happening with me, they're able to share and offload some of that too. And I think there's something really healing that happens when people let you in like that. So I hope this was helpful. Let me know. Feel free to shoot me an email, lauren@spitfirecoach.com, or you can leave a comment where you get your podcasts and all that jazz. And feel free to send this along to anybody you think might find it helpful. But thanks for listening to my story. Sorry it was so long. Actually, I'm not sorry it was so long. I hope that it spoke to some of you, or all of you. But thanks for listening, and I hope you check out our next episode. Y'all keep being awesome.